My name is Emily Carter. I'm 36 years old, and the night my younger brother left me alone on a frozen mountain road began with a cup of coffee he insisted on buying for me. 3 hours earlier, we had walked out of a conference room overlooking downtown Denver with the kind of polite smiles families wear when they don't want strangers to see the damage underneath. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, heavy clouds had already swallowed the last traces of sunlight, and weather alerts flashed across every television in the building. A blizzard was moving toward the Rockies faster than expected. Daniel shoved his hands into the pockets of his charcoal coat and looked at me with the same familiar expression he had used since we were children whenever he wanted something from me. "You're really going through with this?" he asked. The envelope under my arm suddenly felt heavier. Inside were documents that could remove him as Chief Operations Officer of Carter Medical Logistics, the company our mother had built from a single delivery van into one of Colorado's largest emergency medical transport networks. We moved ventilators, blood supplies, surgical equipment, and life-saving medications across hospitals throughout the region. Every delayed shipment could mean the difference between life and death. 6 weeks earlier, I had discovered irregular payments buried inside quarterly reports. Hundreds of thousands of dollars had vanished through vendors no one could verify. When I started asking questions, Daniel became defensive. When I ordered an independent audit, he became angry. When the preliminary findings arrived that morning, everything changed. The missing money wasn't an accounting mistake. Someone had been stealing from the company, and every trail led back to my brother. "I don't have a choice," I said quietly. "The board deserves the truth." Daniel looked away toward the darkening sky. "You've always been so dramatic, Emily. I learned from Mom." That earned a short laugh, but it carried no warmth. Our mother had died 11 months earlier after a long battle with cancer. Since then, the grief that once united us had slowly become another weapon between us. Her will gave me controlling interest in the company because I had spent 15 years managing operations and finance, while Daniel focused on expansion and acquisitions. He never accepted it. In his mind, I inherited authority that should have belonged to him. "Look," he said, softening his voice. "Let's not do this tonight. The weather's getting bad. Sleep on it. I already have." His jaw tightened for a moment before the smile returned. "Then at least let me buy you a coffee before you drive home." I almost refused. Almost. But old habits are difficult to break, especially when they are built from decades of shared memories. Daniel had taught me how to ride a bike. He had defended me from school bullies. He had sat beside my hospital bed when I broke my arm at 12. Even after months of arguments and suspicion, some part of me still wanted to believe there was a line he would never cross. We stopped at a small cafe across the street. He ordered my usual drink before I could speak. Extra shot. No sugar. Exactly the way I liked it. The barista handed us our cups, and Daniel paid without looking at the total. For a brief moment, standing beneath the warm lights while snowflakes drifted past the windows, we looked like siblings finding their way back to each other. Maybe that's why I didn't notice the bitterness. Or maybe I noticed it and chose to ignore it. Outside, the wind had picked up. Snow swirled across the parking lot in thick white ribbons. Daniel pulled me into a quick hug before we separated. "Drive carefully," he said. I smiled. "You too." I watched him walk toward his SUV while I climbed into my car. That was the last normal moment of my life. 20 minutes later, I was driving west along the mountain highway toward my apartment outside the city. Traffic had thinned as the storm intensified. Snow hammered against the windshield, while my headlights carved narrow tunnels through the darkness. I took another sip of coffee at a red light. The bitterness lingered longer this time. 5 minutes later, my fingers began to tingle. At first, I blamed the cold. Then my vision blurred. I blinked hard and tightened my grip on the steering wheel. Something wasn't right. The dashboard lights seemed brighter than they should have been. The road tilted slightly beneath me. My heartbeat slowed in a way that felt unnatural. I lowered the window, letting freezing air hit my face. It didn't help. My hands felt heavier. My tongue felt thick. Panic spread through my chest. I reached for my phone, intending to call 911, but my coordination failed me. The device slipped from my hand and disappeared somewhere beneath the passenger seat. The snowfall intensified. Headlights ahead of me stretched into long red streaks. I pressed harder on the brake pedal as the highway curved around the mountainside. My foot barely responded. The realization hit me all at once. I wasn't tired. I wasn't sick. Something had been put into my drink. My car drifted toward the shoulder. I yanked the steering wheel back. The tires lost traction instantly. Everything happened at once. The vehicle spun sideways across black ice. Metal screamed against metal. The guardrail exploded through my side window in a shower of glass. The airbag slammed into my chest. The car rotated again before burying its front end deep inside a snowbank. Silence followed. Then came the wind. Cold air poured through the shattered window. For several seconds, I couldn't move. My ears rang. Pain radiated through my ribs every time I breathed. Blood dripped from a cut above my eyebrow into my left eye. The engine hissed. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled through the mountains. I fumbled for the seatbelt release and pushed the door open with both hands. Snow immediately blasted into the car. I stumbled onto the shoulder and collapsed to my knees. The cold hit me like a wall. I tried to scream for help, but the storm swallowed my voice. The highway was nearly empty. A few vehicles passed without slowing down, their taillights disappearing into the white darkness. I struggled toward the edge of the road, waving one arm weakly. Then I saw headlights behind me. An SUV pulled onto the shoulder and stopped. Relief flooded through me so quickly that tears filled my eyes. Someone had come back. The driver's door opened. A familiar figure stepped into the storm. Even through my blurred vision, I recognized the way he walked. The shape of his coat, the boots, Daniel. I tried to say his name, but no sound came out. He hurried toward me and knelt beside me in the snow. For one terrible moment, I felt safe. His gloved fingers pressed against my neck, checking my pulse. He leaned closer, and I saw recognition in his eyes. He knew exactly who I was. He knew I was still alive. I reached toward him with trembling fingers, expecting him to call for help. Instead, he stood up and walked past me toward my car. At first, I thought he was searching for my phone to call emergency services. But when he returned, he was holding the envelope from the passenger seat. My envelope. The audit findings. The board documents. The evidence. He slipped them inside his coat. Then he crouched beside me again and reached into my pocket. I felt his hand remove my phone. Our eyes met for one endless second. There was no panic in his face. No confusion. No fear. Only calculation. In that moment, I understood something that hurt more than the cold, more than the broken glass embedded in my skin, more than the crushing pain in my chest. This wasn't an accident he had discovered. This was a plan he had followed. I tried to speak, tried to ask why, tried to remind him who I was, but my lips barely moved. Daniel looked down at me silently, then turned and walked back toward his SUV. I watched his taillights disappear into the blizzard until they became two small red dots swallowed by the storm. I lay alone beside the highway, as snow gathered on my coat, and my eyelids grew heavier with every passing second. The last thought that crossed my mind before darkness pulled me under was not that my brother wanted my company. It was the horrifying realization that he had chosen it over my life. The first thing I noticed when I opened my eyes was the smell of antiseptic mixed with wet wool and melted snow. The second was the pain. It spread across my chest in slow, crushing waves every time I tried to breathe. For several seconds, I couldn't understand where I was or why the ceiling above me looked unfamiliar. Then memory returned all at once. The mountain road, the shattered glass, Daniel's face illuminated by swirling snow, the red glow of his taillights disappearing into the darkness. I tried to sit up, but a sharp pain shot through my ribs and forced me back against the mattress. A machine beside my bed began to beep faster. The movement brought another realization. My phone was gone. The envelope was gone. Daniel had taken both. A doctor entered the room moments later. He looked to be in his early 40s, with tired eyes and dark hair beginning to gray at the temples. He introduced himself as Dr. Nathan Keller and gently asked me a series of questions about my name, the date, and what I remembered. My answers came slowly. Every sentence felt like pushing through heavy water. He explained that I had suffered a concussion, 2 cracked ribs, mild frostbite in my fingers, and severe hypothermia. Another 30 minutes outside in that storm might have killed me. The words should have frightened me. But I already knew something worse than the weather had nearly ended my life. Doctor. Keller hesitated before continuing. There's something else we need to discuss, Emily. His expression changed in a way that made my stomach tighten. Our lab results found a significant amount of a prescription sedative in your bloodstream. I stared at him, certain I had misunderstood. That's impossible. Have you ever been prescribed any sedatives or sleep medication? Never. He nodded slowly, as if he had expected that answer. Did you take any medication yesterday? Anything at all? The memory of the coffee flashed through my mind with terrifying clarity. The bitter taste. Daniel insisting on ordering for me. The strange heaviness spreading through my body less than 30 minutes later. I felt my hands begin to shake beneath the blankets. I only had coffee. Dr. Keller pulled a chair closer to my bed. Emily, I need you to think carefully. Did anyone prepare that drink for you? My mouth went dry. I wanted to say no. I wanted to tell him there had to be another explanation because the alternative was too terrible to accept. Instead, I heard myself whisper, "My brother bought it for me." The doctor didn't react immediately. He simply nodded and made a note on his tablet. "Given your injuries and the toxicology results, we need to treat this as more than a weather-related accident." The room suddenly felt colder despite the heated blankets covering me. Until that moment, some part of me had still been searching for a misunderstanding. Maybe Daniel panicked. Maybe he intended to call for help and lost signal. Maybe shock had made him act irrationally. But none of those explanations accounted for the sedative in my blood. None explained why he had taken my phone. None explained why he had stolen the audit documents. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. A woman in a dark suit stepped into the room accompanied by a uniformed officer. She introduced herself as Detective Marcus Reed from the Denver Police Department. Dr. Keller gave me an apologetic look before leaving us alone. Detective Reed remained standing near the window. His voice was calm and measured. "Emily, I know you've been through a traumatic experience, but there are a few things we need to discuss as soon as you're able." I nodded slowly. He opened a small notebook. "A snowplow driver found you approximately 38 minutes after your accident." His dashboard camera recorded part of the scene. My heart stopped. "Recorded what?" The detective studied my expression carefully before answering. "Another vehicle stopped behind yours. The driver exited the vehicle, approached you, entered your car, and left the scene without contacting emergency services." Every muscle in my body tightened. I already knew what he was about to say next. "The license plate is visible in the footage." I closed my eyes. It was my brother. Silence settled over the room. Detective Reed didn't seem surprised. "Can you tell me his name?" "Daniel Carter." Saying it out loud felt like betraying someone I had spent my entire life protecting. Memories collided inside my head. Daniel teaching me to drive. Daniel helping me move into my first apartment. Daniel standing beside our mother's hospital bed, promising we would always take care of each other after she was gone. The brother I remembered couldn't exist in the same world as the man who walked away from me in the snow. One of them had to be an illusion. Detective Reed asked me to describe everything I remembered from the previous evening. I told him about the meeting, the audit findings, the coffee shop, the crash, and the moment Daniel took the envelope and my phone. I left nothing out. When I finished, he closed his notebook slowly. "Do you know why your brother would want those documents?" I swallowed hard. "Because they could remove him from the company." The detective waited. I forced myself to continue. "My mother founded Carter Medical Logistics. After she died, I inherited 60% of the voting shares. Daniel inherited 40. And the documents? Preliminary audit findings. Evidence of financial misconduct." His expression sharpened. "Are you saying your brother may have stolen company funds?" "I think he stole much more than that." Before he could ask another question, voices drifted through the partially open door. One of them froze the blood in my veins. "So, how is she?" There was no panic in Daniel's voice. No fear. No relief. He sounded mildly inconvenienced, like someone checking on delayed luggage at an airport. Detective Reed looked toward the hallway but didn't move. A second later, Daniel appeared in the doorway wearing the same charcoal coat I had seen disappearing into the blizzard. His eyes landed on me first, then on the detective standing beside my bed. I watched his expression shift. Surprise. Concern. Calculation. He recovered quickly, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Emily." He stepped forward. "Thank God you're okay." I said nothing. Detective Reed turned toward him. "Mr. Carter?" Daniel hesitated for the briefest moment. "Yes, I'm Detective Reed. We need to ask you a few questions regarding last night's incident." The color drained from Daniel's face so quickly that it was almost imperceptible. He looked at me again, searching for answers. Searching for weakness. Searching for any sign that I doubted what I remembered. He found none. "Of course," he said carefully. "Anything I can do to help." Detective Reed's voice remained calm. "Before we continue, you should know that hospital tests indicate your sister had a sedative in her system at the time of the crash. We also have video footage showing your vehicle at the scene." Daniel froze. The silence that followed lasted less than 2 seconds, but it felt endless. "What?" he asked finally. "There must be some mistake." For the first time since waking up, I wasn't afraid of the storm outside. I wasn't afraid of my injuries or the investigation or what would happen to the company. I was afraid of the realization settling into my chest with each passing second. Daniel wasn't shocked because I had been drugged. He was shocked because I had survived long enough to tell someone what he had done. Daniel wasn't arrested that morning. The toxicology report confirmed the presence of a prescription sedative in my bloodstream, and the dashboard footage proved he had stopped at the scene, taken my phone, and left without calling for help. But Detective Reed explained that investigators still needed to establish exactly how the drug entered my system and whether Daniel had administered it intentionally. The footage showed abandonment and theft. It did not yet prove attempted murder. Evidence existed. Proof was still being built. The distinction frustrated me more than I expected. After everything that had happened, I wanted someone to stop him before he had a chance to lie his way out of what he had done. Instead, I watched him walk past my hospital room an hour later, speaking quietly with his attorney on the phone, as if the worst night of my life were nothing more than an inconvenient misunderstanding. Dr. Keller returned shortly after Daniel left and adjusted my medication. The pain in my ribs eased slightly, but my thoughts remained sharp and restless. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Daniel's face illuminated by falling snow. I replayed the moment over and over, searching for something I had missed. Fear, regret, hesitation. There had been none. What haunted me most wasn't that he had left me behind. It was the certainty in his expression when he did it. Around noon, a nurse named Claire entered my room carrying a small plastic bag containing my personal belongings. My smartwatch had survived the crash, though its screen was cracked. She placed it on the bedside table beside a glass of water and gave me a sympathetic smile before leaving. I fastened the watch to my wrist, more out of habit than necessity. As soon as it connected to the hospital's Wi-Fi network, notifications began flooding the screen. Missed calls from Olivia, missed calls from unknown numbers, alerts from our corporate security system. My stomach tightened. At 11:50, 2 p.m., less than 20 minutes after Daniel drove away from the crash site, someone had used my credentials to access the Carter Medical Logistics Board portal. At 11:50, 7 p.m., a remote request had been submitted to reset my company password. At 12:04 a.m., my account had opened the confidential audit files and the emergency board resolution I planned to present on Monday morning. I stared at the screen in disbelief. Daniel hadn't just abandoned me. He had used the time he thought I was dying to break into my accounts. Detective Reed returned minutes later, and I showed him the notifications. His expression hardened as he photographed each alert. "Did anyone else have access to your login information?" he asked. "No." "Did your brother know your passwords?" "No." "But he had my phone." He nodded slowly. "Then he may have used your device for multi-factor authentication." Hearing it explained so clinically somehow made it worse. While I lay unconscious in the snow, Daniel hadn't been panicking or searching for help. He had been executing a plan. Detective Reed lowered his voice. "Emily, I need you to answer an important question. Who benefits if something happens to you?" The answer came instantly. "Daniel." He waited for me to continue. "Our mother's will divided ownership of the company between us. I inherited 60% of the voting shares. Daniel inherited 40. And if you died?" I swallowed hard. "My shares would pass into my estate." He remained silent. Then the realization hit me with crushing force. I closed my eyes. "No, Emily? I never updated my estate plan after Mom died." The detective leaned forward. "Who is the beneficiary?" For several seconds I couldn't speak. Finally, I forced the words out. "Daniel." The room became unbearably quiet. When our mother died, I postponed updating my estate documents because life became a blur of grief, board meetings, and trying to keep the company stable. Daniel and I promised each other we would sort everything out later. Later never came. If I had died on that mountain road, my brother would have inherited control of Carter Medical Logistics within weeks. Detective Reed closed his notebook slowly. "Did your brother know this?" "Yes." "When was the last time you discussed it?" 3 days ago." He didn't need to ask another question. We both understood what that meant. A soft knock interrupted us. Detective Reed stepped aside as a woman hurried into the room carrying an overnight bag and a laptop charger. Olivia Hayes had been my best friend since college and our company's senior financial controller for nearly 4 years. Normally, she moved through life with confidence and quick humor, but now she looked pale and exhausted. The moment she saw me awake, tears filled her eyes. "Oh my God." She crossed the room and wrapped her arms around me as carefully as she could. "I thought I lost you." I held on to her longer than I intended. When she finally stepped back, her expression shifted from relief to anger. I saw Daniel downstairs. My chest tightened. What did he say? That you were confused? That the police were overreacting? Detective Reed exchanged a brief glance with me before stepping toward the door. "I'll give you a few minutes, but don't discuss anything with your brother if he comes back. Call security immediately." After he left, Olivia pulled a chair closer to my bed. She looked like she hadn't slept all night. Dark circles framed her eyes, and her hands trembled slightly as she set the laptop charger on the bedside table. "There's something I need to tell you," she said quietly. Her voice carried a weight that immediately made my stomach tighten. "What is it?" She hesitated. "I think Daniel's been stealing from the company for much longer than we realized." I felt my pulse quicken. "What do you mean?" Olivia opened her bag and removed a flash drive and several printed spreadsheets. 3 months ago, I noticed payments going to a vendor called Summit Healthcare Solutions. The invoices looked legitimate at first, but the numbers kept growing. $42,000, $68,000, $94,000. She placed the documents on my bed. When I checked the vendor registration, the business address belonged to a private mailbox. I stared at her. "Why didn't you tell me?" Pain flashed across her face. "Because Daniel told me you approved everything personally. He said the payments were tied to a confidential expansion project and that discussing it would violate a non-disclosure agreement." She lowered her eyes. I believed him. Anger rose inside me, but it wasn't directed at Olivia. It was directed at the realization that Daniel had been manipulating everyone around him for months. "When did you realize something was wrong?" 2 days ago. She looked up at me again. "I confronted him after I discovered the payments had reached almost $800,000. My chest tightened. "What did he say?" Olivia's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "He asked whether you'd signed your updated estate documents yet." The room seemed to tilt beneath me. "What else?" She swallowed hard. "He said that after Friday you wouldn't be standing in his way anymore." Cold spread through my body despite the heated blankets covering me. Olivia reached for my hand. "Emily, I called you 6 times last night. Your phone went straight to voicemail. I didn't know what was happening until the police showed up at the office this morning." I squeezed her hand weakly. "This isn't your fault." But even as I said the words, I realized something terrifying. Daniel hadn't acted impulsively. He hadn't panicked after the accident. He had been planning this for weeks, maybe months. The coffee, the stolen documents, the access to my accounts, the inheritance, the missing money. None of it was random. It was all connected. A knock sounded at the door before either of us could speak again. We both looked up. Daniel stood in the hallway holding a bouquet of white lilies in one hand and a leather folder in the other. He smiled when he saw me awake, but there was something different in his expression now. Something colder, something calculating. His eyes moved briefly to Olivia, then back to me. "Can we talk alone?" he asked. For the first time since the blizzard, I watched genuine fear appear on my brother's face. It lasted less than a second before he forced his expression back into something resembling concern, but it was enough. Detective Reed had seen it too. His eyes moved from the unsigned documents on my blanket to the smartwatch on my wrist and then back to Daniel. The silence inside the room stretched painfully. Daniel stood slowly, smoothing invisible wrinkles from his coat as though he could regain control by appearing calm. "I was just helping my sister handle some temporary paperwork," he said. Detective Reed stepped farther into the room without taking his eyes off him. "Medical power of attorney, voting proxy, and a statement accepting responsibility for the sedative found in her bloodstream?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "Emily runs a major company. We have employees depending on us. I was trying to protect the business." Detective Reed glanced at me. "Did you ask your brother to bring these documents?" "No." It was the first time since the accident that I had answered a question about Daniel without hesitation. His eyes shifted toward me, searching for doubt, guilt, anything he could still use against me. He found nothing. Detective Reed picked up the folder and examined the signature pages. "Mr. Carter, I'm going to ask you to leave the room." Daniel's gaze hardened. "This is a private family matter." "Not anymore." The detective's voice remained calm, but the authority behind it was unmistakable. For a moment, I thought Daniel might argue. Instead, he forced a tight smile and looked back at me. "Emily, you're making a mistake. You don't understand the damage this is going to cause." I held his gaze. "You caused the damage when you left me in the snow." The words landed harder than I expected. For the first time, something flickered across his face that almost resembled shame. But it disappeared too quickly to trust. He turned without another word and walked out of the room. The moment the door closed behind him, I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Olivia moved closer to the bed and took my hand. My fingers were trembling. Detective Reed sat down in the chair Daniel had occupied moments earlier. "Emily, I need you to tell me exactly what happened after Olivia left the room." I replayed the conversation from beginning to end. Every question, every answer, every subtle admission. I told him how Daniel said I wasn't supposed to crash, how he admitted he needed me to miss the board meeting, how he insisted I sign the documents to make everything disappear. Detective Reed listened without interrupting. When I finished, he looked at the smartwatch. "Did it capture everything?" I nodded. He carefully removed the device from my wrist and placed it inside an evidence bag. "This recording may change everything." Olivia exhaled shakily beside me. "Can they arrest him now?" Detective Reed leaned back in the chair. "It's a significant piece of evidence, but we still need to corroborate it with the toxicology report, financial records, and digital evidence." The answer frustrated me, even though I understood it. Daniel had spent months planning this. "We couldn't afford to make mistakes because of anger or fear," Detective Reed continued. "The strongest cases are built slowly. People like your brother count on emotions to outrun evidence." I looked toward the window where heavy snow continued falling outside. Less than 24 hours earlier, I had been lying unconscious beside a mountain road while Daniel believed the storm would erase everything. Instead, each passing hour seemed to reveal another layer of what he had done. Olivia opened her bag and pulled out the flash drive again. I didn't want to say this in front of him, but there's more. Detective Reed turned toward her. "Go ahead." Olivia placed several printed spreadsheets on the bed. After I confronted Daniel about Summit Healthcare Solutions, I started making copies of everything I found. The payments weren't random. They followed a pattern. She pointed to a series of transactions highlighted in yellow. Every time our company signed a new emergency supply contract with a hospital network, money moved to Summit within 48 hours. Detective Reed studied the documents. "How much are we talking about?" Olivia swallowed hard. "Just under $2 million over the last 18 months. I stared at her. The number felt impossible. Daniel hadn't been skimming money. He had been draining the company. "Who owns Summit?" I asked quietly. Olivia looked at me with guilt in her eyes. "On paper, it belongs to a holding company registered in Nevada. But the mailing address traces back to a private mailbox less than 10 minutes from Daniel's apartment." Detective Reed made several notes. "Do you have copies of the original records?" Olivia nodded. "I backed up everything before coming here." He looked relieved. "Good. Do not access those files again from your work computer. If Daniel suspects we're investigating the financial side, he may try to destroy evidence." Olivia's face paled. "You think he'll go that far?" Detective Reed didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at me. We both knew the answer. A man willing to leave his sister to freeze to death wouldn't hesitate to delete records. My hospital room fell silent. I watched the snow outside the window and thought about all the years I had spent defending Daniel. Every missed deadline, every questionable decision, every time I convinced myself he was under pressure or misunderstood, I had mistaken loyalty for love. The realization hurt more than my injuries. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Dr. Keller stepped into the room carrying a tablet. He glanced at Detective Reed before turning to me. "Your latest lab results are back." Something in his expression made my stomach tighten. "What is it?" He looked down at the screen. "The sedative found in your bloodstream has been identified." Detective Reed sat forward immediately. "What was it?" Dr. Keller met my eyes. "Zolpidem." The name meant nothing to me. Detective Reed, however, reacted instantly. "Prescription only?" Dr. Keller nodded. "Yes. And based on the concentration in Emily's blood, we're looking at a dosage significantly higher than what's typically prescribed for sleep disorders." A chill spread through my body. Detective Reed closed his notebook slowly. "We'll need to determine who had access to that medication." Dr. Keller hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "Actually, the hospital already checked the state prescription database at our request." Every muscle in my body tensed. And? He looked directly at me. A prescription for the exact medication was issued to Daniel Carter 4 months ago following shoulder surgery. No one spoke. Olivia covered her mouth with both hands. Detective Reed stood up immediately and reached for his phone. My pulse pounded painfully against my ribs as the pieces finally began locking together. The coffee. The timing. The inheritance. The missing money. The documents. The recording. And now the prescription. Daniel hadn't made a terrible mistake during a moment of panic. He had built a plan around the possibility of my death. Detective Reed stopped at the doorway and turned back toward me. Emily, from this moment forward, your brother cannot contact you directly. If he calls, texts, or tries to visit again, notify us immediately. I nodded, but my attention remained fixed on the snow falling beyond the hospital window. Less than a day earlier, I had believed the storm nearly killed me. Now I understood the truth. The storm had only hidden the person who tried. The following morning, Detective Reed returned to my hospital room carrying an expression I had learned to recognize over the past 2 days. It was the look people wore when they knew something important but weren't ready to say it out loud yet. Olivia sat beside my bed with her laptop balanced on her knees, while I struggled through another round of physical therapy exercises designed to prevent my ribs from stiffening. Every movement hurt, every breath reminded me how close I had come to dying on that mountain road. Reed closed the door behind him and placed a thick folder on the table beside my bed. "We executed the warrants last night," he said. Olivia immediately straightened in her chair. "What did you find?" Reed opened the folder and spread several photographs across the table. The first showed my phone sealed inside an evidence bag. The second showed the manila envelope Daniel had taken from my car. The third showed a prescription bottle bearing his name. My pulse quickened. "What about his financial records?" Reed glanced at Olivia. "Your analysis was accurate. The shell companies received nearly $2 million over 18 months. Olivia exhaled slowly. Even after everything we had discovered, hearing the number spoken aloud made it feel more real. Reed continued. "We also recovered messages between Daniel and a private lender. He used his expected future ownership stake in Carter Medical Logistics as collateral for several high-interest loans." A chill spread through my chest. "Expected future ownership?" Reed nodded. "He promised to deliver controlling shares within 10 days. Olivia looked at me. "He already assumed you'd be gone." The words landed like a physical blow. Deep down, I had known it. But knowing something and hearing it confirmed were two different things. Reed pulled out another document. "There's more. Daniel attempted to access your company accounts again last night." I frowned. "How?" "He used a backup recovery method linked to your personal email address." Olivia shook her head in disbelief. "He's still trying to take control." Reed's expression darkened. People who think they're losing everything often make reckless decisions. I looked toward the window where sunlight reflected off the snow-covered mountains. 2 days earlier, I had believed my life was falling apart. Now I realized it had been unraveling for much longer than I ever understood. Daniel hadn't simply made a desperate choice during a financial crisis. He had built an entire future around the possibility of my disappearance. Reed checked his watch before looking back at me. "He wants to meet with you." Olivia sat upright immediately. "Absolutely not." I felt my stomach tighten. "Why?" "His attorney contacted us this morning. Daniel says he wants to resolve everything privately." I almost laughed. The audacity of it was astonishing. After stealing from the company, drugging me, abandoning me in a blizzard, and trying to forge control of my shares, he wanted privacy. He wanted one more opportunity to control the story. Reed leaned forward. "We think you should hear him out." Olivia stared at him. "Are you serious?" "He's under surveillance. We'll be nearby. But if he believes Emily is uncertain or willing to negotiate, he may say things he otherwise wouldn't." I understood immediately. Reed wasn't offering Daniel a meeting. He was offering him one last chance to incriminate himself. Fear tightened in my chest, but beneath it, I felt something stronger. Resolve. Daniel had spent my entire life assuming I would protect him. He still believed that if he said the right things, I would choose family over truth. He still didn't understand that the woman he left in the snow no longer existed. 2 hours later, Reed helped arrange the meeting in a private family consultation room on the 4th floor. Olivia sat behind a partially closed divider with her laptop. Reed and another detective waited outside the door. My replacement phone rested face down beside a cup of water with the recording application running. When Daniel entered the room, he looked tired for the first time since the crash. His tie was loosened. Dark circles framed his eyes, But the moment he saw me, he smiled. The performance began immediately. Emily. He sat down across from me. You look better. I said nothing. He placed another folder on the table between us. I know you're angry. Angry? I asked quietly. You left me to die. His expression tightened. I thought you were already gone. There it was again. Not remorse. Justification. He leaned forward. You have to understand the pressure I was under. I folded my hands together to hide their trembling. Then help me understand. Relief flickered across his face. He thought I was listening. He thought he still had a chance. Mom gave you everything. The company, the voting shares, the authority. I spent years building Carter Medical Logistics while you made decisions from conference rooms. I stared at him. You stole $2 million. I borrowed it. You drugged me. He looked away. I needed time. The room seemed to grow colder around us. You followed me onto that mountain road. I followed you because I realized you were in no condition to drive. I held his gaze. And when you found me, silence stretched between us. Finally, he exhaled sharply. Everything had already gone wrong. So you took my phone. I panicked. You took the audit documents. I was trying to save the company. I shook my head slowly. No, you were trying to save yourself. Something snapped behind his eyes. The carefully constructed image disappeared. You think you're better than me because Mom trusted you. His voice hardened. You always have. I remained silent. He continued speaking, each word faster than the last. I built relationships. I expanded operations. I brought in contracts. But none of it mattered because you controlled the votes. His breathing quickened. I only needed you out of the Monday meeting. That's all. The medication was supposed to make you sleep. Then you crashed the car. I felt my pulse hammering in my ears. He had said it again. Another admission. Another piece of truth he couldn't take back. When you found me in the snow, you knew I was alive. His jaw tightened. You don't understand what I was facing. Answer the question. For the first time, he looked directly at me without pretending. Yes. The word barely rose above a whisper. And you still left. He lowered his eyes. I realized your death would solve problems I couldn't fix. I stopped breathing for a moment. Hearing him say it out loud hurt more than the crash, more than the betrayal, more than the injuries, because it destroyed the final piece of the brother I thought I knew. He looked back up at me, desperation replacing anger. But you survived. So let's fix this. I'll repay the money. I'll resign quietly. We can tell everyone the accident was caused by medication you took by mistake. I stared at him across the table. You still don't understand. Confusion crossed his face. Understand what? I picked up my phone and turned the screen toward him. The red recording timer continued counting upward. At that exact moment, the door opened behind him. Detective Reed stepped into the room, followed by another officer. Daniel turned in his chair, and I watched the color drain from his face. Reed spoke calmly. Daniel Carter, you're under arrest for assault, reckless endangerment, theft, evidence tampering, and financial fraud. Daniel looked back at me as the officers moved toward him. For the first time since the blizzard, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. Not fear of prison, not fear of losing the company. Fear that his story no longer belonged to him. As the handcuffs closed around his wrists, he shook his head slowly and whispered the same words he had repeated my entire life whenever things fell apart. Emily, please, help me. I held his gaze and felt something inside me finally break free. I already did, I said quietly. More times than I should have. Daniel's arrest didn't end the crisis. It exposed it. Within hours, rumors spread through Carter Medical Logistics, our banking partners, and every hospital network we served across Colorado. News traveled fast when a company responsible for delivering life-saving medical equipment became the center of a criminal investigation. Reporters gathered outside the hospital. Employees flooded my inbox with questions I couldn't answer. Vendors wanted reassurance. The board demanded an emergency meeting. And my phone rang constantly with calls from attorneys, investors, and family members who suddenly remembered I existed. The hardest call came from my aunt, who had helped raise Daniel and me after our father died. Her voice trembled as she asked the question I would hear repeatedly over the following months. Are you sure you want to do this to your brother? I looked down at the fading bruises on my hands and remembered the snow gathering on my coat while Daniel's taillights disappeared into the storm. I'm not doing this to him, I said quietly. He did this to himself. The emergency board meeting took place 4 days after I was discharged from the hospital. I wore a rib brace beneath my blazer and moved carefully, ignoring the pain every time I took a seat at the conference table our mother had used for nearly 20 years. Olivia sat beside me. Detective Reed had advised me not to discuss the criminal investigation beyond confirmed facts, so I focused on what I could prove: the audit findings, the shell companies, the unauthorized transfers, the attempted account access, the forged statements. Daniel attended by video conference from county detention. His attorney sat beside him, expressionless. When my image appeared on the screen, Daniel looked exactly the way he had on the mountain road. Not ashamed, not sorry, just frustrated that I was still alive. His attorney immediately argued that I was medically unfit to participate. Dr. Keller anticipated that attack. He provided a written evaluation, confirming that I was mentally competent and had never been prescribed the sedative found in my bloodstream. Olivia presented the financial records. The independent auditors confirmed that nearly $2 million had been diverted through shell companies controlled by Daniel. Our bank representative explained how the fraudulent accounts had been frozen before additional funds could disappear. Then the board's legal counsel played a short segment from the recording captured in the consultation room. The medication was supposed to make you sleep. Then you crashed the car. Daniel's attorney objected immediately, but the damage had already been done. The silence that followed felt heavier than any argument. One by one, the board members who had trusted Daniel for years lowered their eyes. The vote was unanimous. Daniel was removed as chief operating officer, stripped of all access to company systems and facilities, and referred for civil action to recover the stolen funds. An independent oversight committee was established to review every contract and financial decision he had approved during the previous 5 years. As the meeting ended, our corporate attorney placed a sealed envelope in front of me. My mother's handwriting covered the front. For Emily, only if the company is ever threatened from within. I stared at the envelope for several seconds before opening it. Inside was a single handwritten letter. My mother explained that she had discovered smaller financial irregularities involving Daniel years earlier. She covered the losses herself because she believed he would change. But she never fully trusted him again. That was why she gave me controlling interest in the company. Not because she loved me more, but because she believed leadership required accountability. The final sentence nearly broke me. Emily protects what people depend on. Daniel protects what he believes he deserves. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back inside the envelope. For the first time since her death, I understood the burden she had been carrying alone. The criminal case lasted 11 months. During that time, Daniel changed his story repeatedly. First, he claimed I had taken the sedative voluntarily. Then he blamed Olivia for fabricating financial records. Later, he argued that his recorded statements had been taken out of context. Each explanation collapsed beneath the weight of the evidence: the toxicology report, the dashboard footage, the stolen phone, the shell companies, the forged account activity, the prescription records, the recovered audit documents, and finally, his own words. The snowplow driver who found me testified that another 30 minutes in the storm would likely have killed me. Dr. Keller explained the effects of the sedative and how the dosage in my bloodstream exceeded normal medical use. Detective Reed described the evidence recovered from Daniel's SUV and apartment. Olivia testified about the shell companies and Daniel's instructions to conceal transactions. When my turn came, I walked slowly to the witness stand and looked directly at my brother. For the first time since the arrest, he couldn't avoid meeting my eyes. I told the court about the boy who taught me to ride a bicycle and the man who left me to die beside a frozen highway. I explained how betrayal becomes more painful when it comes from someone who knows exactly where your trust lives. I told them that losing my company would have hurt. Losing money would have hurt. But discovering that my own brother valued control more than my life shattered something much deeper. I wasn't there to punish the child, I remembered. I was there to hold the man he became accountable for the choices he made. 2 weeks later, Daniel accepted a plea agreement. He pleaded guilty to multiple felony charges, including assault, reckless endangerment, theft, evidence tampering, and financial fraud. The judge sentenced him to prison, ordered full restitution, and prohibited him from serving as an officer or fiduciary of any business after his release. Before delivering the sentence, she looked directly at him and said words I will never forget. "The blizzard did not make you abandon your sister. It only gave you the cover you believed you needed." My aunt cried quietly in the courtroom. Several family members avoided looking at me altogether. For months, They had described Daniel's actions as mistakes because accepting the truth meant acknowledging how often they excused his behavior. After the hearing, they asked whether I could find it in my heart to forgive him. I told them forgiveness and accountability are not opposites. One belongs to healing. The other belongs to justice. Carter Medical Logistics survived. Under independent oversight, we recovered most of the stolen funds, retained every full-time employee, and expanded our emergency delivery network into 3 additional states. Olivia became Chief Financial Officer. We created stronger financial controls, increased transparency, and established an employee emergency assistance fund using money recovered through the civil settlement. I also launched a winter roadside rescue initiative for stranded drivers in rural areas. The first rescue vehicle we purchased was equipped specifically for mountain storms like the one that nearly killed me. 1 year after the accident, I returned to the stretch of highway where my car crashed. The damaged guardrail had been replaced. The snowbank was gone. Standing beside me were Olivia, Detective Reed, Dr. Keller, and the snowplow driver who stopped when others kept driving. I thanked him again for saving my life, but he simply shrugged and said, "Anyone would have done the same." He was wrong. Not everyone stops. That was the lesson I learned the hardest way possible. Family doesn't guarantee loyalty. Love doesn't erase accountability. And silence never protects the people who need it most. For a long time, I believed survival meant getting back to the life I had before the blizzard. I understand now that survival meant building a new life where I no longer ignored uncomfortable truths to keep other people comfortable. Daniel lost the company he tried to steal, the future he tried to control, and the sister who spent years protecting him from the consequences of his choices. I didn't defeat him through revenge. I defeated him by telling the truth and refusing to carry his secrets any longer. If this story moved you, take a moment to ask yourself an honest question. Have you ever protected someone who kept hurting you simply because you shared history, blood, or love? And if you discovered that the person you trusted most valued power more than your well-being, would you walk away or keep giving them another chance? Share your thoughts in the comments because your story might help someone else find the courage to choose truth over silence. And if you believe that accountability matters, no matter who the person is, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another story about resilience, justice, and the strength it takes to rebuild your life after betrayal.